Welcome to the Excellent Executive Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Katrina Burrus, and today we have Tom Meadowcroft. Tom, welcome.
Merci, bonjour. Good morning,
Bonjour.
hello.
Yes, we knew each other in Switzerland, so of course we speak French. So you are a viticulturist, and you have your own winery in California and San Francisco area. So tell us what brought you to that.
Yes. When I was 19 years old, I went to go work in Bordeaux, which is in the southwest part of France. Bordeaux is a very well-known region throughout the world as having excellent soils and really a level of professionalism that starts with education from some of the best universities in Bordeaux. And I wanted to experience the heart of European winemaking and the traditions there, Katrina.
So what did you learn there that you probably could not have learned in the US, according to you?
The important aspect of the education of making wine in Europe is the merging together of viticulture and oenology. Viticulture is the study of the vines and agriculture. Enology is the chemistry of the winemaking. And in the United States, those two fields are separated and you get degrees in each field. Whereas in Europe, it's that merging that is very different.
So what do you think the merging offers differently than separating it?
Yes, good question. So it brings about a holistic approach to winemaking, that ultimately winemaking is made in the field. Whereas in the United States, what has been the tradition is this aspect of you become a professional in one area. You may recall sort of the Adam Smith division of labor, that you become specialized. Well, in Europe, they really take this different approach. And I think that ultimately brings a certain finesse and refinement in the winemaking process.
So you had that experience in Europe, and then you were an employee and a manager there, right?
Exactly. So I, in the late 1990s, I moved from Washington State to California. Just as a little bit of background, when I got back to the United States in the late 1970s, I went back to university, and I actually followed a degree that was not in viticulture or enology. It was really in business and business management and governance. And with that, I went on to run a successful construction business for 20 years. And I woke up one morning and I said, why am I doing this and not winemaking? So that's when I moved to California, and I got a second degree in viticulture and winemaking from the Napa College. So it was about 2 weeks into the program that I realized I really didn't want to make wine, but I wanted to work for a vineyard management company, Katrina. And at a vineyard management company, it's a little bit like construction and investment management, because we were managing a portfolio of some $400 million worth of vineyard properties on behalf of wineries like Mondavi, Opus One, Cakebread, Duckhorn, Chandon, and many others as well. So the job there, much like what I learned in France and in Switzerland, is about tying together the land with the winemaking and working very closely with winemakers in that process.
I see.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so that's the intermediary, if I understood correctly, between the vineyards and the winemakers. So you bring the grapes to the winemakers, or explain a little bit more, because this is new to me.
Yes. So it is quite common in the United States that wineries don't own their land. They don't own the vineyard lands. And so they basically work very closely with a grower or an investment group that essentially makes bespoke grapes for them. And it's a very close alliance where representatives from the wineries work very closely with the agricultural people to essentially farm to a particular style for their winemaking style. Can I give you an example?
Yes, please do.
All right. So, for example, we had two clients that were buying Sauvignon Blanc, which is a white wine, from the same vineyard. One was Duckhorn and the other one was Maryvale. Maryvale wanted a more grassy, sort of New Zealand style of Sauvignon Blanc. Duckhorn, let's just say a blend of maybe Bordeaux and California exuberance. So there was more sweetness in the Duckhorn style and more grassy style in the Maryvale. By our approach to viticulture, we would pull leaves off in the fruit zone for Duckhorn, and that brought about more fruit style. For Maryvale, less leafing, more grassy style. So it's that expertise and that communication together that is, I think, a hallmark of what happens in the United States, is this type of relationship. Whereas in Europe, it is clearly a winery, an estate that owns the land, that has the winery, and everything is integrated. So I think that's a fairly major difference in old world versus new world management styles.
So the old world, I mean, they inherited this land from generations to generations, because today it probably would cost a fortune to even have those lands, no?
Yes, in many situations, yes.
How would you say the management as a leader is different in Europe than here? Now, you explained how the whole education system is different, but how would you say the leadership is different?
Yes. So what happens with many European wineries is that for 20, 30, maybe even 300 years, they've had the same land and the same style of winemaking. So there tends to be an ingrained aspect of this is the style that we will always make, and their customers expect that as well too. That can create some stagnation. That can create the obvious staticness in their operations. Whereas in the United States, we have a lot more freedom to create new wines. We have, almost to use an analogy with French restaurants, a plat du jour, you know, the daily special, where
Sure.
I can make a new wine that my audience will really adore or really hate. So we have a lot more creativity and innovation in the United States. And I think you probably have seen that across the board with many companies, US companies versus European or elsewhere. So that relationship of being able to buy grapes from different growers, and that is an expected experience in the United States, allows us that freedom to be able to do new things. Whereas in Europe, you don't have that fundamental freedom. There's one other thing that I wanted to share with you about some of the constraints that have happened because of entrenched ownership of land and of wineries in Europe versus the United States. Is a friend of mine in Bordeaux. He was telling me about how the vineyard crews would tell him when they were going to pick. Whereas his experience is he made the choice about when to pick. And they had huge arguments about this fundamental aspect of cooperating together between a vineyard crew and the winemaking crew, which sounds a little bit ironic, Katrina, with everything that I've said about the integration in Europe of vineyard management and winemaking. But there are some of these old entrenched habits that do exist, whereas in the United States, we tend to have a lot more freedom.
But who makes the final decision when to pick the grapes here in the US?
Well, it is the winemaker,
Uh-huh.
and it's in many situations in Europe, it is the winemaker that should be making that decision. Um, but oftentimes it comes down to certain constraints of the labor that they have. They, they, they have restraints on when the labor can work.
Ah,
So, whereas here we have more freedom, we can work on a Sunday. Um, and yes, I'm sure in Burgundy and Bordeaux, if it's an exception, they will work on a Sunday as well too. But there seems to be a lot more rigidity, let's say.
so tell us a little bit about your experience of being an employee in Europe and an employee in the US.
Okay, well, uh, the work experience is old and perhaps a little romantic. Wonderful breakfast, lunches, and dinners around the wineries. We had lodging at the wineries, so there's a lot of this aspect of. Um, I don't want to romanticize it too much by saying they took good care of us. We got paid very little money, but there are certain creature comforts that really do exist in Europe that are quite terrific. In the United States, I can speak to it from a much more recent situation. And again, having my own winery today, Meadowcroft Wines, um, I can say that we probably have similar labor laws as they do in Europe. We have regulations about the number of hours to work as well too. Um, I I I think there's been a lot of progression that's taken place in California specifically, where we used to have a 60-hour work week and now we have just a 40-hour work week. So that's a dramatic change that's happened in just the past 2 years that this law has been put into a place.
Enormous. How does that affect you?
Well, it's increased the costs for grapes, and it's also increased the cost for making the wine as well. From the standpoint of rescheduling the workforce, because we do work on weekends during harvest, um, we've come to a place where it's expected that you might have some overtime. So 40 hours being the normal work week, maybe 10 to 15 more hours of overtime is pretty normal at harvest time, which is basically from end of August until about the end of October.
I see. And are they paid extra or is it expected to be?
Yes,
I see.
yes, yeah.
Uh-huh. So now you've told us a little bit about the difference between being an employee in Europe and an employee in the US. What about being a manager and a leader in either place? What's the difference from your experience?
Yes. Here today, in the wine world, I take the philosophy that it is a collaboration. By hiring good people, you put them in a place where they can make good decisions from their own personal experiences. Um, we we talk often. I'm at the winery every day. Um, well, maybe not every day because I do travel visiting distributors around the country and the world. Um, but we are in communication all the time, and I think what makes that different than um, in Europe is there's maybe more of a hierarchy. And whereas here in the United States, it's more of a flat organization, if that makes sense to you. Um, but in the end, I have to make the decision. And but it is after consulting with a number of people on my team.
I see. I see. And where do you think the future of winery will take place compare or how's the positioning of California wine making compared to not only Europe but to South America where there's a lot of wine that is coming out at a very competitive prices.
Yes, absolutely. You're right. And I think that uh, the trend in consumption of wine is flat. You may have heard that they're pulling out vineyards in all over Europe and in the United States um, because of the consumption is going down. I look at it from the standpoint that people are gravitating towards quality, not quantity, Katrina. And I see it across the board with many other products. One of my other favorite products is chocolate, which we are very familiar with from Switzerland, right? And I
Right.
found that here in the United States, there are some amazing chocolate producers here in the San Francisco Bay Area. Truly, truly remarkable. I have probably more favorites now in California than I do in Europe in chocolate. Um, so back to this point of where is the future going for wine? It is towards quality, and people are wanting their affordable luxuries, and I think we're seeing that across the board with many other products. So, how is California positioned to be in that arena, that global arena? Well, there are global wine groups buying properties in California. People that have properties in Argentina, France, or Italy, um, and they see the long-term value of being in the U.S. marketplace. The main reason being is that we have an abundance of fantastic workers at every level of the work environment. We also have a very wealthy and robust economy here in the United States, and so that is why people from around the world want California wines. Um, I know that if you go to Dubai or if you go to um, uh, India, Hong Kong, you will find California wines on the best wine lists around. And it's because we have amazing wines and they are approachable as well.
Mhm. What about South America? What are they trying to get into the American market for sure, and they are. Uh, they don't have the restrictions on the labor force. I don't believe so. That is here in the U.S., which of course makes the price higher. Uh, where do you think they will be positioning themselves?
I see South America as being a real growth marketplace as well too, Katrina. I see that more and more wealthy people will be drinking the wonderful wines from Argentina. Also, seeing the wines from Argentina in Miami, Florida, Georgia. There's a big Latino community in the United States, as you probably see it in Nevada as well too. Um, and so they want the wines from their home countries. So I see a bright future for Argentina as well too.
So you've had an education in Switzerland, went to school there for many years, and you're also an American and lived here a lot. What do you think is the advantage of having these two strong cultural influences? Because you weren't there just on vacation, you've lived there for many years. And
Absolutely, absolutely, and one of the beauties of having grown up in Geneva is that in the '60s and '70s, uh, there were robust international organizations there, not only for profit, but NGOs, Red Cross, United Nations, and many ancillary nonprofits around that world. You would walk into a restaurant, as an example here, and on the wine list, you'd see wines from Italy, Austria, Germany, Spain, and of course, Switzerland and France. What does that mean then in the grand scheme of things? Besides, Katrina, you and I haven't gone to school where there were maybe 60 to 70 different nationalities at the school. Well, I think what it showed me is that the world of wine was not just my neighborhood of Switzerland. Because if you or I had gone to school in Paris or some other town in France, we would have just drunk the wines from that region, and we would have become indoctrinated into believing that particular region was the best in the world. So, um, so there's that example about wine. And I think coming back to the example of the school we went to and the people, we learned that there were wonderful, smart, funny people from all around the world that we were going to school with. That's a very powerful thing that has left a deep imprint on me of not being prejudicial or having stereotypes about people from different countries.
Yes,
Does that
I'm
make
sure.
sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense. And it helps also when you lead a group of people because you're already used to a huge diversity naturally of countries, of languages, and every language you have a different assumption underlying that language,
Yes,
so I won't go into that because I can talk about that for a long time, but there are assumptions within a language, and by just simply speaking different languages you see different perspectives. I mean, and then you add that the culture, the familiarity with different countries. So I'm a proponent of it, obviously. And it was great.
absolutely.
We had a great school. So we're coming to the end of our podcast. Where can people get a hold of you? One, and two, where can they buy your wine?
Yes. Well, the beauty of the internet, of course, is that you can buy it just about anywhere. Going to our website, meadowcroftwines.com. I have my wines in 30 different states. The laws around alcohol, as many of your people in your audience will probably know, is that you have to get licensing in every state. But that's just the nature of the beast in the United States. So to me, the United States is like 50 different countries
Yes, I see. But you can
because
get
of
it.
the regulations that we have to go through.
Yeah. So what would
Yes,
you
you can buy it
call?
online. I make over 20 wines.
Wow. You make over 20 wines?
Go ahead.
Different wines?
I do.
Wow.
Yes, yes.
So
So let me tell you, yeah.
go ahead, go ahead.
So Cabernet Sauvignons to sparkling wine to Chardonnay, Cabernet Sauvignon, Sangiovese. So in a way, Katrina, I have mimicked a little bit of this world that I grew up with in Geneva. It's to embrace this spirit of uh, what it means to drink a wonderful style of wine that reminded me of the Italian wines that I had in Switzerland, but getting the grapes here in California, in Napa and Sonoma, and uh, and celebrating the California spirit in the wines.
That's wonderful. Thank you so very much for your sharing your experience and knowledge across continents as well. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Katrina. I'm really honored to be on your podcast. I listen to it as often as I can, and you're inspirational. Thank you.
Thank you.